Amend the agenda to call, you want to amend the agenda to call for an election of officers?
It's on there.
It's on there.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. That was the question, was whether to amend it to remove that or not. Okay. Okay. First order of business, do we elect a new chair? So I will run this portion of it as I'll remain the chair until a new chair is elected.
Mr. Culpepper, for the record, can you state who's present in the room in case somebody doesn't have a visual?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Okay, present in the room today is myself, Mr. Cummings, Mr. Davenport, Ms. Weems, and as what's your title again? And the ex officio, the school board chair, Ms. Brown, as well as Ms. Whitson, the school board auditor, Sarah Branch, Ms. Linetti is the lawyer, Crystal Pate, and Dan Hopkins. Anybody I missed? All right. First order of business is the new election of the chair. So at this point, I will entertain nominees for the chair.
I'd like to nominate David Culpepper to continue as chair.
Any other nominations? Pardon? Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, it does need a second for that nomination. Are there any other nominations? Okay, hearing none, ask for a vote for myself as to continue as chair of the board.
Aye.
Aye.
For the record, I just need to state the names of the people who voted. Sorry.
Okay, you got it. It's unanimous, four ayes from myself, Mr. Cummings, Mr. Davenport, and Ms. Williams. All right, the next order of business is the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda as published?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous, four ayes. You can keep correcting me if I'm
You're fine. I'll
missing
get
anything
it.
you need me to say explicitly. First item on the agenda is the approval of the September 29th, 2025 regular meeting minutes. Does everybody have an opportunity to review the minutes?
I move to accept the meeting minutes.
As published, thank you.
Yep, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, four ayes. Now we have, next item is our external audit, which will be presented by Ms. Beckhart.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for having me here to present the results of the audit of the school board of the City of Virginia Beach for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2025. My name is Laura Harden. I am the engagement partner who oversaw the audit of the school board. We also had a manager, Courtney Doval, who worked very closely with all the staff within finance and throughout the school board to complete the audit. And we also had a independent second reviewer who comes in at the conclusion of our audit to provide us a fresh set of eyes prior to our issuance of our audit opinion. So we did audit the school board for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2025. We issued our opinion on December 12th, 2025. We issued what's called an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. That is the best opinion that you can receive as a result of your audit. We also do perform audits under both government auditing standards as well as the Auditor of Public Accounts specifications for audits of counties, cities, and towns. We identified no instances of noncompliance that are required to be reported under those standards or specifications. As a part of our audit process, we are required to gain an understanding of the internal control environment of the school board. If we identified any control deficiencies, we would be required to report those to you, but we did not identify anything that we consider to be a material weakness in internal control over financial reporting. We also didn't identify any kind of misstatements during our audit process that were either corrected or left uncorrected by management. Next, I'll go over some qualitative aspects of accounting policies. So management is responsible for the selection and use of appropriate accounting policies. These policies are described in Note 1 of the financial statements. In that note, you will see that the school board implemented a new standard this year. It's GASB statement number 101 for compensated absences. This resulted in a restatement of beginning net position for fiscal year 2024 of, which reduced net position by 72.5 million. I'll stop. Does anybody have any questions on that before I move on? Okay. We had noted no other existing policies that were changed during the year and did not identify any inappropriate accounting policies or practices as a result of our audit procedures. We are also required to gain an understanding of the related party relationships and transactions of the school board. We had no issues in identifying those transactions, none that were previously unidentified to us or resulted in any type of non-compliance with any laws or regulations. Throughout the course of the year, there could be items that are considered to be significant or unusual transactions. These would be items that are outside of the normal course of business for the school board. There were none during fiscal year 2025, and we noted no inappropriate accounting practices. In the financials, there are also things that are considered to be estimates. These are items that can change year over year based on the inputs that go into making those estimates. The most sensitive to the financial statements are the estimates related to pension and other post-employment benefits, assets, liabilities, deferred flows of resources, and expenses, as those are based on actuarial valuations. And then the capital asset depreciable lives, which are based on the expected useful life of the assets. There are also risk management claim liabilities, which are based on actuarial valuations and prior claims experiences, and the compensated absences, which is based on, for those items that are not paid out upon termination, there's a more likely than not estimate that has to be completed to determine the liability for those items. As a part of our audit, we do evaluate the key factors and assumptions in creating those estimates and determine that they are reasonable in relation to the financial statements as a whole. The financial statement disclosures are considered to be neutral, consistent, and clear, and we didn't note any that we considered to be particularly sensitive because of their significance to the financial statement users. We do not provide any non-attest services to the school board, and we are not aware of any circumstances or relationships that create a threat to our auditor independence. We are independent of the school board, and we have met our other ethical responsibilities in accordance with relevant ethical requirements related to our audit. Just a few final required communications. We had no difficulties in performing our audit, nor did we have any disagreements with management. We didn't have to consult with anybody outside of our engagement team for any kind of contentious matters. As of the date of our audit opinion, management signed what we call a management representation letter, which represents to us that they've provided all the information that we need to complete our audit. We're not aware of any cases where management consulted with other accountants for any type of second opinion. And there are no other findings or issues that are required to be reported to you. As a part of our audit process, we did not identify any fraud or illegal acts or, as I mentioned, non-compliance or any sort of waste or abuse. And we have no indications about substantial doubt about the school's ability to continue as a going concern. This slide here just notes that within the ACFR, there are a few additional sections other than the basic financials. The first section being the required supplementary information, which is information that is required by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board to be included in the ACFR. We don't provide an opinion on this information, but we do review it to ensure that it's materially consistent with the basic financials. Supplementary information, we provide what's called an in relation to opinion to the basic financials, and then other information is unaudited, but we do review that for material consistency. And then lastly, there are a couple of additional financial reporting standards that will be coming becoming effective for fiscal year 2026, the first being GASB Statement Number 103 for financial reporting model improvements, and the second for GASB Statement Number 104, disclosure of certain capital assets. These standards won't result in any sort of a restatement, but will likely change a few disclosures within the statements. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Go ahead, Larry.
So, no findings.
No findings.
You would characterize this as a clean audit?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just got one curious question for you. You on a couple slides ago, you said no fraud, no abuse. You know, our auditor has uncovered what I would call minor cases of fraud or abusive position. So when you say that, are you referring?
There's no report instances that we are required to report to you.
Okay, all right. Because I have viewed, for example, that the conduct of our auditor has been exemplary in ensuring that we have processes in place to capture those.
Correct, and we do meet with the school board auditor to make any inquiries and others within the organization. And then if there is anything that's identified during those discussions, we have certain procedures that we are required to perform to determine whether it was appropriately identified and handled, as well as whether it meets the level of reporting to those charged with governance.
Okay, all right. So in essence, you know, your audit confirms that they're doing business correctly and capturing those things.
Correct.
Is that important?
So, I presume materiality is the basic factor here. If it's,
It's
If
it's a factor, but it's not just necessarily a dollar factor. There's also a qualitative aspect that we look at when we're making those materiality considerations.
okay, but there's nothing that would cause a material misstatement.
Not that
in
we
the-
identified during our audit
in the
procedure.
accounts.
Okay, and I think Larry would love me to restate what you said at the beginning, which is this is the highest score you can give for an internal audit.
Correct.
Okay. I want to thank you all very much for traveling here and for your diligence in what is effectively oversight of our program.
Thank you so
And
much.
thank you for coming today to brief us. All right, Ms. Whitson, I think I turn it over to you at this point to discuss our completed reports.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Today I will be presenting 4 reports, all of which are on the approved audit work plan. And you should have copies of those in your packet. I'll start with the expenditure analysis at John B. Dye Elementary School. The objective of this non-audit service was to determine if policies and procedures for approximately $51,000 of division-level spending from September of '24 through August of '25 were followed, and to present the expenditures into understandable categories. You'll see in the listing of transactional test work on the top of page 2, there were no exceptions with that test work. We've listed a breakdown of the expenditures by category, and you'll see that those results also on page 2. Do you have any questions on those categories? Okay. My only other conclusion statement would be that this is the first time in doing the expenditure analysis that we haven't had any findings. Yeah.
Excellent, all right.
So, are there any questions before we move on to the next completed report?
No questions?
Okay, perfect. The second completed report was the procurement of sole source contracts and purchasing audit. In this audit, internal audit reviewed sole source procurements made between September 1st of '23 through April 30th of '25. The objective was to determine if they were processed in compliance with Virginia Public Procurement Act and school board policies. The period under audit covers both the previous and the current procurement directors. We looked at 60 sole source procurements and determined that all requirements were met except for 28 that did not have supporting documentation to support the determination. In addition, 4 of the 41 approved sole source procurements requiring public posting were not posted. The last objective was to determine if payments to sole source vendors above $10,000, which is the delegated purchasing limit, were made after the sole source was approved. We reviewed 150 payments, 94 of which were made after the sole source was approved. 54 of the payments were made using another procurement method, and 3 did not follow procurement requirements. And we'll talk more about those exceptions in just a few moments. We confirmed that all vendors and products with rejected sole source determinations followed procurement requirements, and there were 3 vendors in total, each with 1 payment. If you turn in in the report to the findings, which start on page number 5. Finding number 1, starting on page 5, gives the details of the 4 sole source procurements that were not publicly posted. Noting that 2 were above VBCPS's posting threshold, while the other 2 were above $200,000, which is the Virginia Public Procurement Act threshold. These were all approved under the previous director. The 4 sole source procurements now have been posted, and procurement has implemented a new process to ensure that awards are publicly posted. Finding number 2, which is at the bottom of page 5, summarizes the 3 payments reviewed that did not follow procurement requirements. The first payment to College Board was a direct payment, and these are assessment tests, but they exceeded the $200,000 exemption limit. The other 2 purchases were missing the required number of quotes, as they each only had 1. We recommend that procurement be added to the approval path for direct pays over $10,000, and for procurement to implement a process to ensure that the required number of quotes be included before a requisition is converted to a purchase order. And today we received information from the city who would be correcting the approval path, that they have put that correction into production today. So we're very happy about that. And then for finding number 3, which is at the bottom of page 6, we note that for 28 of the 60 sole source procurements approved during the period, they did not have invoices or quotes to support the need for the sole source procurement. We were unable to determine the cause because these were under the previous director. The sole source procurements had all of the other required components. There was just not source documents to support them. Procurement, our recommendation for this particular finding was due by 12/31/25, and procurement has completed that recommendation. The final finding, number 4, on page number 7, notes inconsistencies in the guidance for sole source determinations. Procurement updated the policies and procedures manual and the sole source guidelines to align with other published materials, and we were able to verify all these inconsistencies have been corrected. If you turn to page 8, we had 3 different other items noted. These are not necessarily things that were violating policy. They were just items that we noted for improvement. The first is noting instances where sole source determinations were not required due to an existing contract or an exemption that allows the purchase to be made without competition. The second item noted, sole source expiration, is to list the expiration date on the sole source approval for contracts, which is consistent with the contract expiration date. So in essence, what this would do is it would eliminate carrying the sole source forward to the renewal period. And the thought behind that is to allow review for new vendors that may have come up when the contract expired. And finally, the last other item noted was related to record retention requirements. We noted that in reviewing the public postings, that some of the postings may be outside of the record retention policy. Are there any questions related to the sole source contracts audit?
Ms. Weems?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for looking into this. This is one of my requests. I think a couple of us requested this. So in letter A on the first page, so basically of those reviewed, basically half of them did not have a quote or requisition.
Yeah.
So can you explain or clarify the difference between a quote or requisition and justification? I don't.
So when we were reviewing, procurement has a list of things that are required. Basically, the requesting department prepares a memo to explain what the product is, what the service is, and why it's being requested, and to explain why there's only one vendor that can provide the service. Typically, what happens when that comes to procurement, there is either an invoice or a requisition documentation to prove what we're purchasing. And for these 28, that wasn't in the file. We didn't have those in the files. We can't determine, because this was the previous procurement director, why those are missing. Everything else in the sole source determination was present and they were approved, but we did not have the backup to substantiate what we were purchasing. So I can't say that it wasn't looked at, because that would be unfair, because that person no longer works here. And the current director, we asked the current director, but she was not, she was not in the loop of that when those took place.
All right, yeah.
So if the requisition or the quote is not included, what could go wrong?
Well, I mean, I think it just further proves, what we're actually purchasing, because some things could be complicated. I mean, it just gives the source of, the material, because it could be that we're purchasing something that's very technical, that maybe the memo wouldn't completely explain. And so the quote would be something that would, or invoice would be something that would further explain what we're purchasing.
Okay, well, it would seem to me that if there's no quote or requisition, you don't know if the amount you spent for that item, or whatever it was, is appropriate or not.
Well, I mean, the sole source determination is approved on the front end. So.
As well as the amount, the expected
The-
amount?
Yeah, and usually it's a not to exceed if we don't have a specific dollar amount. If, for instance, we're acquiring a service and we don't know how long that service would last, it would be a not to exceed within an expiration date. If it's a product, we would typically know what the cost would be. But because we did test the payments, so we did see invoices to support the payments that were made. What we didn't see was the proof on the front end for those 28. I can't say that we didn't have that, because we may very well have had those at the time. It's just they weren't stored in procurement's record retention.
Okay, so without the quote or the requisition, you would still be able to determine if the
Well, they-
amount spent was appropriate or not?
Well, the sole source determination has that on there.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay,
So yes, that's true.
Yep. Thank you.
I'm just trying to understand the process. So, is there a contract that exists, like in a portal or something, that has the price of what something's purchased, or with the quote? Like, how does?
It depends on what we're buying. So kind of the flow would be that the Department of School would identify the need for either a good or service, and they would, based on the dollar amount, they would determine what procurement requirements are needed for that. So if you look on page 2, we did a little triangle to kind of show the kind of the flow of what Virginia Public Procurement requires, which is kind of, that's the top tier, and those limits are much higher than what we require, right? So we require much more information to substantiate procurement than the Virginia Public Procurement Act. Then we have school board policy, and then we have what procurement services requires. So once the department or school determines the need for an item, be it a good or a service, they would look to see what's required for that purchase, to make sure that we're compliant with Virginia Public Procurement. Based on whatever that need or service would be, then they would determine if they need to go out for bid and get more than one quote. For sole source, they have determined that there's only one vendor that can fulfill that need. So then they're required to submit that information to procurement services, who is responsible for vetting that request to make sure that it is valid, that there isn't another vendor that could provide that service, or there isn't an existing contract in place that could cover that service or good. So only the Director of Procurement Services is able to approve the sole source determination. Basically, once that sole source determination is approved, then either the good or service can be ordered or a contract can be formulated. So a contract is separate from the actual procurement unless we're using an existing contract that already had the procurement completed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how, and I'm just trying to understand and wrap my head around it just from my own experience having to go through procurement and purchase things, and maybe I'm just missing something internally, so I'm just asking questions.
At the end of the day, the goal is to make sure that we are following public procurement
Yeah,
and that we're buying only the things that we need to buy for the least amount of money.
yeah.
So the whole purpose of this process is to make sure that we are being good stewards of the dollars.
Yeah, and I think I
Yeah.
guess I'm thinking, because like whenever I did procurement, or I had to buy something at procurement, I would just go through Workday and it would include the variables that you said were missing. So it'd like create a ticket and
Well,
then
and
flow
again, I
through.
kind of go back to the point
Yeah.
that we have a previous, somebody that was previously in the position who's
With
no
the
longer
process,
here.
yeah.
And so I'm not really able to say, why
Yeah.
are those maybe they
Okay.
were in a file folder that no one knew, Typically, all of these things are scanned and they are in a certain area for
Yeah.
record retention, and that's what we looked at. But for these particular 28, we couldn't find those.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm just asking questions
Yeah,
because from
yeah.
my perspective, like my experience has been, in order to eventually land at the purchase, it had to go through a software where
Well, and I think.
all the X's are crossed. So
Well, and I think another point to make is that
I'm not
for-
putting a positive or negative. I'm just trying to understand.
Well,
yeah.
for transparency purposes, I feel like that source document is important because, that is proof that the item that we're purchasing or service that we're acquiring, that there is only one vendor. So I feel like that's important because that's transparently saying this sole source was really required.
Yeah, more. Go ahead.
Okay, so, when we say director of procurement,
Procurement services.
okay,
Yes, sir.
is that the only person in that office that would be responsible for ensuring those documents are in the file?
That's the person who is responsible for approving the sole source determination.
Ultimately.
And so what we talked to the current procurement director about was putting a process in place to make sure that there is a cross-check. Because the director is the person responsible for approving them, there should be maybe someone else in the chain of command that would then ensure that all of the documentation was complete. Also, the communication went out to schools and departments to say, if you're submitting a sole source requirement or request memo, you need to make sure you have backup to support it. So it's twofold. We're making sure that the users, the schools and departments, know that they have to submit it in order for it to be approved. And then the folks in procurement services need to make sure that they keep track of it and that it's stored.
Okay, so we have a level of comfort that with the new director, this is resolved?
Yes, well, you can see from the implementation dates and the comments that I've made, she is, like, when we started this audit in April, we stopped for the school activity funds audit, and then we picked it up in the fall. And everything that we identified that were problems, she was immediately making changes. So
Okay.
she's very much, in my opinion, she's very proactive and is trying to make sure that, and she's come up with training and, so I feel like, yes, to your point, I feel comfortable with their improvement in their process.
Okay, would you normally do a circle back?
We do, we follow up.
Okay.
We definitely follow up, absolutely.
Okay,
I'm gonna anchor on that point in a minute, but let Ms. Brown speak first. Ms. Williams, then Ms. Brown.
All right, I just have a question. So of these 60 that were reviewed, was the quota requisition under the previous person present for any?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so
Yes,
that gives me a little bit of concern and alarm because there was some available. And so it's not like they were all missing.
Right.
And so I am concerned about that. And also, I know you don't get into the specifics of what is available really, but there's been some things where I know for a fact there's other vendors for very similar products when I'm even looking at what's up on the site available. So I would just ask that, I know you follow up, but I would ask that this committee, if that's the will of the committee, that you guys discuss that follow-up at a later date as well.
Absolutely.
Ms. Weeks?
So you reviewed 60 sole source procurements. How many sole source procurements do we have a year, roughly? And what percentage
I
is
don't
that?
have that exact number. I can tell you that we reviewed 60 in that time frame between September 1 of 23 to April of 25. And the reason that we looked at such a large period was to try and cover the work of 2 administrators. But I can definitely get you that specific breakdown they're all posted online, except for the ones that we identified that were missing. But I don't have that number in front of me, but I can certainly follow up and give you it by annum.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh, sure.
My first question here actually is, and I think there's a name for it, but I can't think of what it is. But essentially, when you split purchases up in order to avoid some of these limits, did you look for it? Did you see any evidence of that?
We didn't, in this particular work, because we didn't. We do that in some of our other test work, but we didn't in this particular work because we were focused solely on sole source procurements.
Okay, well, this is
Yeah.
obviously a function of sole source procuring. You understand what I'm talking about, right? Where $200,000, for example, is a threshold above which you have to get a competitive bid. And then, hey, I'm lazy and I want to buy from my buddy over here
Right.
who sells good stuff. So I'll break it up into 10 purchases of $20,000, and then I'm below all these thresholds. But that's illegal.
Right.
It's not allowed.
Right.
So that is an important part, in my view, of looking at, are we doing sole source purchasing correctly? Because if there is
We looked at
there's a
every,
systematic process of
Yeah,
ducking the system,
we
that's bad.
looked at every sole source that was approved, but I see what you're saying. Did we try and determine if we were circumventing the procurement requirement?
Right.
We do that in other audits, but we did not do that as a function of this audit.
Okay. Well, the other thing that the other members here have already mentioned, and I said I was going to anchor on, is what follow-up here is required.
Sure.
Totally agree with Mr. Davenport, or actually both of you, who basically pointed out, actually all three of you did, pointed out that the missing records, whether or not they indicate fraud, they don't disprove it, right? So it leaves a void, if you will, of information where you kind of go, what's going on? And there is obviously a risk that we don't have a record of what this thing cost, money went out the door, and we can't compare the money that went out the door to what the thing actually cost.
Okay, so let me clarify that we do have records of what we actually purchased on the,
Right, you said that.
Purchased, What we don't have is the initial, when we requested the sole source determination, we don't have that piece. So we do have an invoice to support the payment that we made, but we don't, to your point, we don't have the front end.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't have where it started.
Right.
And Ms. Brown made the point that the fact that some of them are missing and not all of them are missing
Right.
is in and of itself a little
Right.
bit strange.
Well, and the thing about that that's difficult is because those 28 were under the previous director, it's difficult to correlate, you know, what, I mean, I can't ask questions of that person.
Understood.
All I can do is ask questions of the person who's currently serving, and there was no additional information available.
Right, and that's obviously a good thing,
Yeah.
that the current process does not appear to have the same problem.
Right,
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's obviously a good thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's probably fair to wrap this up by kind of saying there's definitely some follow-up here required.
Yes, yes.
Both to confirm that the processes that have been identified have been, I'll just finish the sentence, I'll get
sure.
back to you. The process that you already identified have been addressed. It sounds like they're already in the process of doing that, but we obviously want to confirm. And then secondly, I do think it's important to figure out how to take a look, at least broad spectrum, of whether or not there is any effort to split these purchases up to
Sure,
avoid these thresholds.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And, well, there's an audit that's coming up on the work plan, on my proposed work plan, that will address that concern.
Okay, perfect. So we'll talk about that in a
So
minute.
just to clarify the follow-up request, so I will be following up, as I do with all audits, we'll be following up on the recommendations to make sure they've been implemented. Would you want, aside from that, would you want management to follow up with an update? Because we have a placeholder for updates from management. Is that what you're requesting, or are you requesting a follow-up audit? I just want to make sure that I'm complying with what you all are
Well, let me,
requesting.
I was referring to follow-up audit.
Okay.
Let me confer with my other members here. If there are any thoughts on that? Yeah, my intent in that comment was a follow-up audit.
Oh, follow-up audit.
Follow-up by audit to look at the things you've already looked at.
Okay.
And address the process. I don't object to any update from management
Okay.
about the same topic.
Yes.
Of course.
And we will absolutely do that.
Okay.
And to clarify my comment, I'm comfortable with whatever you deem appropriate to resolve the issues that have been
Okay.
raised.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on?
No, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. The next audit is the change in bookkeeper school activity funds audit for Corporate Landing Elementary. This change in bookkeeper took place the 1st of November. We completed the audit for the period of July 1st through October 31st. Our conclusion from the audit is that the financial statement is fairly stated. This is shown, the financial statement is shown in the appendix. The school is compliant with substantially all policies and procedures. We noted an exception for improper cash receipting and an exception for account coding. Nothing to be alarmed about. Are there any questions about the change in bookkeeper audit?
Looks like there are not.
Okay. The next audit that we completed was the annual cash disbursements audit. So for this particular audit, we tested 100 transactions. We had previously tested 50, so we doubled the sample. We looked at 90 non-payroll disbursements across the division, and then we looked at 10 travel reimbursements, which touched 42 different employees. Management has implemented all of the improvements from the previous year's audit, because if you all remember, we had quite a few recommendations related to travel last year, and we had quite a few findings related to travel. All of those have been, those updates have been made, and we did not have any travel-related findings, so I'm very happy about that improvement. We had one finding, and it was related to a late payment for two different areas. And we recommended, one was in the area of maintenance service, and the other one was for a school. And for both of those, we've recommended a monitoring process for each to eliminate those problems. Are there any questions on the annual cash disbursements audit?
So you looked at 90,
Yes.
what would the total population be? Just an estimate.
I can't tell you that, but I can get back to you,
I-
with that.
I'm-
It's large.
I'm
It's
sure
large.
it is.
It's large.
Yeah.
And what we try and do is as you can see on page 2 in the methodology, we try and focus on transactions between $50 and $100,000. So for those, to David's point, for those ones that would kind of fall through the cracks as far as procurement requirements. So we try and look at those lower dollar amounts.
Well, I saw between 500.
Yeah, I'm
and
sorry, did I?
100,000. Yeah.
500, between 500 and 1,000. But I'm more than happy to, we have that data. I just
Well,
don't-
I'm okay knowing that it's far more than
It's-
than
it's-
90.
Yes, it's far more. And what we try and do, just so that you're aware, we try and share the sample across our schools and offices so that we get representation. And we also try to share representation amongst the period. So we don't want them all at the end of the fiscal year, we don't want them all at the beginning of the fiscal year, so we try and do a good job of covering the entire period.
How comfortable are you that 90 is a representative sample?
I would not say that it's a representative sample. We have done this audit for years and it's been isolated to only 50 transactions. And this particular year, I decided to increase the number because of some concerns that had come up, from my risk assessment, and so I upped the sample.
Yep.
And I'm very happy that we only had really two problems of that total, and that there were no problems related to the 48 travelers.
Yeah, okay, well, my comments are just
Yeah,
to help us keep it in perspective.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Are there any questions on cash disbursements before we move on?
Nope, looks like
Okay.
that.
So the next item is the annual report and proposed work plan for calendar '26. We've published our calendar year 2025 annual report, which is a recap of all of the reports completed during the past year. You'll note on the chart that's on page 3, shows a total of 21 engagements that were completed during the calendar year. These are in the categories of performance, non-audit, and investigative other services. A summary of each engagement follows in the following pages, giving just a brief summary of the objectives and the conclusion for each audit. And if you'll look at page number 9, you'll see a note about work in progress. We completed all of the, I'm sorry, not page 9. It's on page 6, that we have 2 engagements from a previous work plan and 1 investigation that are still in progress. I will tell you that the work on the HVAC improvement grant is underway. Sarah's actively working on that. And the utility audit is complete. We just don't have the report from the consultant. So that will be coming very soon. And then I'll be providing an update to you all in closed session about the investigation that's still underway. So with the exception of those 3 engagements, everything on the work plan has been completed. And then, if you'll turn to, page 9, you'll find the proposed calendar year 2026 audit work plan. The work plan is comprised of audits that are required by state code, audits and other projects required by the internal audit charter, and audits proposed based on the annual risk assessment, giving consideration to the timing of each engagement. As a reminder, the audit committee had previously approved in the fall 3 follow-up audits for 3 schools, and those will be completed later this month. The plan in the following pages shows the objectives and overview in broad terms for each audit, and I'm happy to address any questions that you may have about a particular engagement on the proposed work plan.
Just one question. Sorry, any other questions? Go ahead. Oh, okay. Just one for you. You said a minute ago that my question about splitting purchases would be covered in one of these audits. Which audit
contracts.
is going to capture that? Is that the
Contracts audit.
contracts audit? Okay.
Contracts audit. And you'll note that I don't, because of the contracts audit, I didn't put the annual cash disbursements audit on there because I felt like it was overlap. So my thought is we'll do the contracts audit, we'll see how things pan out with that, and then we'll put, for the next year, we'll put cash disbursements back on.
Okay. Any objection to any of that? All right.
Are there any questions on the approved work plan?
Any other questions? Okay. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yep.
One question.
Sorry, it's just taking a minute
Oh, yeah, take your time.
Is it the role of audit? So I'm just looking at software utilization audit. And I like that you're going to be looking at redundancy, you know, like multiple licensures or for one product or for probably under ed benefits or something like that. I'm trying to think how to phrase my question. Do we put, as we're going through that list, I often think about competitors, you know, and so I wonder if you could just handpick, because, you know, I'm thinking of the end product where we look through and see some of the software being utilized, if we could put in some competitor pricing, if it's available or easily obtainable,
So
just for frame of reference, I
So-
think.
Are you thinking that maybe like an appendix listing all of the software purchased and the amount and the vendor?
Yeah.
Something like that?
And then, and to give an example, so I'm not saying that has to be every single, because that'd be a time waste, but I'm thinking of like example of like Adobe versus Canva. In the realm of like graphic design, now there's, you know, those are apples and oranges, but I'm just thinking about, you know, if there is similar software at cheaper price, you know, just probably hand selecting some and just seeing that's where my curiosity goes to.
I think it'll be very interesting to see if there's redundancy and if there's potential for savings because of that, because of the fact that, you know, one department or school may not necessarily know or understand what the other department or school is using.
Yeah.
The Department of Technology has software that we'll be able to use to identify usage. So I think that will be quite interesting. So, I mean, to your point, I think that we could compile, you know, we're gonna have the data because I believe that our starting point will be looking at the general ledger for coding to find those purchases. So we're gonna have everything,
Yeah.
so.
That's just what I was thinking about. But I think this looks like a good plan and I'm excited to see the end product.
Go ahead, Ms. Brown.
I appreciate what Matt just said. I think that's great. And I recognize you might not be able to do it, everything like you said. But I think that it's a great idea, you know, maybe if there's like 10 or 15 different things where, you know, that way we can say we're really looking at the comparison piece. But my other question is, when you just mentioned usage, is that something that will be included as well?
I would
in this
like to,
report?
yeah, I would like to, because we haven't started the work. I've been talking to David Den for a couple years about this project and the software that he has that we can use to kind of identify the usage.
Okay.
So say, for instance, we look at a program, we should be able to see how many users are using that program. And I'm not sure about the granular details because I'm not in the weeds of it yet, but we're absolutely going to be able to see who uses what and how often.
Okay, that'll be very interesting because some of these software contracts are pretty pricey, so I'm very interested in that. So thank you for your work on that.
And my goal is to not only, I'm gonna have to work with instructional technology, but is to look at not just instructional, but to look at operational, because I think it's, you know, we need to look at both sides of the coin. So my thought is it's gonna be a division-wide audit, even though I have Department of Technology and Instructional Technology as the points of contact, it's gonna touch our whole organization.
Okay, that one will be really interesting to see the outcome of.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's a great point. Go ahead. Was that again?
I see the process.
Okay, well, I'll say something while you process that, because this is potentially a really deep rabbit hole.
Yes.
Even
It's a big,
Yeah.
the scope is very big,
Even
so.
last night when David Denn was talking about his budget, it ran me to start thinking about that because, vendors, manufacturers, they're trying to get more money
Right.
out of their customer. And so they're all going to these monthly, essentially rental things. And, we've all dealt with it at home too. And I'm getting tired of monthly fees just like everybody else is, rather than sell you a product.
Right.
So maybe this was part of his point was, rather than go in this direction with this company that wants to rent something to us, let's go this direction and get a product that's just as good or just as functional or will meet our purposes. And we can buy it and be done with it, for some number of years until we have to upgrade it anyhow. And along those same lines, and this is harder than usage is, do we need, and I won't name any product here, but do we need the product that does everything and has all the bells and whistles?
Right.
When all anybody ever uses is the most basic functions.
Yeah.
And Word's a great example.
Well-
Word does all kinds of things, but what do? I
My
type on it.
suspicion is that we may, in doing this work, we may come up with some other audit ideas. That because, again, we're a small shop, we have a limited amount of hours, we may have to build a list of things that we want to look at
Yeah.
beyond,
That's- I know exactly what you mean, and it's part of what I was thinking here and why I said it's potentially a very deep rabbit hole.
Yes,
And what you may find is that the best thing you can do is dig into it enough to identify the places we need to dig into.
well, and our starting point is always, school board policy and regulation, to see what our requirements are, and then go from there. And there are processes in place for purchasing software. I mean, we do have, there is a path that you have to follow when you want to buy software. So we do have that in place, but it'll be interesting to look at the whole picture. And what we'll do is try and identify the key controls, because that's kind of how our work pans out as we look for key controls.
Process.
And, right, exactly. So, I don't know that we'll be able to cover everybody's requests, but because I think what we'll do is we'll determine what the most, what the key controls are, determine how we're doing on those, and then we'll probably build a list of future audits, from that.
Okay, appreciate that.
Yeah, I was just trying to think through like utilization metrics and activity metrics because I'm familiar with what those look like on the back end of software, and I'm just thinking on one hand, if you see low utilization, you're like, well, is this being utilized? Is this worth the cost? But if the low utilization has a high ROI,
Right.
that's
It's okay.
yeah, so I feel like we might need some narrative alongside. If there's, I don't know what the magic number is. You all are magnificent experts at this, but if there's a low number of like 2%, 3%, 5%, 20% utilization, maybe some like figuring out like, when I think about tiers, right? Like red light, yellow light, green light. So green light means this software is used all the freaking time. Everyone's on it. It's like parent view, people are clicking there. Yellow light is like Canva would probably be the better example, but like, yellow light's probably in that mid tier, and then like red light, you're like X% is in this threshold. So, add in some narrative. Because that's kind of what I'd be thinking through.
Well, and
Yeah.
because we're so specialized in certain areas,
Yeah.
you can't compare apples to apples because,
sure.
for instance, something that food services uses, and maybe used a more limited amount of time because it's specialized. So we will have to be very, very detailed in explaining the
Yeah.
information and analyzing it and understanding it.
Well, thanks for this work. I think it's a lot of work, so you looking at utilization data, and pulling those reports and whatnot. So I hope that, I assume that my gut tells me that we'll see some good things from it and whatnot, but
I hope so.
I just sit back and think about the parent perspective where you're clicking through like 6, 7 different systems and you wonder if there's a more efficient pathway forward sometimes. And luckily Google stores passwords so you can remember your logins to every single thing, but that's kind of just what my brain thinks about is like, are we overpaying for all these different, is there a consolidation effort? Those are things I think about.
There's potentially payoff here, though,
Yeah.
because one of the things Mr. Den mentioned yesterday is that, roughly 75% of his budget is stuff.
Right,
So, I mean, this is not potentially a small pie to win something from.
absolutely.
Right. Any other questions? Okay.
So, a motion to approve the work plan, take action.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah.
Entertain a motion now to approve the annual work plan.
So move.
A second? All in favor?
Second.
I,
The work plan is approved.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Hang on one second, one second.
Sure, take it, Jim.
All right, for the record, that was approved by unanimous vote.
Thank
All right,
you.
on to
Thank
the, next is peer review.
Yes, peer review. So in your packet, you have a copy of our completed peer review. Just as a reminder, we're required by governmental auditing standards to have a peer review completed every 3 years. And so this fall, we had our peer review, and we received a pass, which is the top rating, without a management letter. So sometimes organizations receive a pass with suggestions for improvement, which is called a management letter. We did not have a management letter, so we got the very top rating, and so we're very proud of that as an office. So you have a copy of that, and we've posted that on the internet and the external website as well. So that's in your packet, so you can take a look at that. Any questions on the peer review? Okay. The second bullet is peer review service. So we participate with our professional association, which is the Association of Local Government Auditors. They're actually that's the organization that conducts our peer review in exchange for us participating and giving service to other organizations. So we basically get the work at travel cost only. So the team that came in to review our work, we did not have to pay them to do the engagement, we just paid for their travel cost. So we, in return, give our service. Sarah completed a peer review in November for the city of Wilmington, Delaware. And so that was a great experience for her. And I am going to be completing a peer review in February for Wake County Public Schools. So I'm very excited about that. So that's on our horizon.
Okay.
And work in progress?
Yes, please.
So, the work in progress, we talked about this when we were talking about the 6 month, about the, annual report. 3 open, engagements, all being actively worked on. You'll see the 6 month schedule in your packet, kind of notates those engagements. And there are a bunch of placeholders, TBDs, that will be replaced with the approved work plan engagements. So we're excited about that. Any questions on the 6 month work schedule?
Looks like none. Okay, so we're on to item G, other items. So it's an update for management, or no?
I don't believe that there are any.
What's
any
listed on
updates.
here is
Yeah.
capitalized
Yeah,
assets
that's a
audit.
placeholder for future.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah. I don't believe there's any updates from management.
okay. Somewhere in here, I've got the. All right, the next item is to go into closed, and I had a script here for closed, and I think I've lost it.
Here, in the agenda.
Oh, it's right there? Oh, yeah, please. I'd love for you to read it. Okay, well, now.
I can't actually make the motion, so
Okay.
it's this whole section right here.
I will now entertain a motion to recess into closed meeting pursuant to exceptions from open meeting allowed by section 2.2-3712 D of the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended for the following purposes: personnel matters, discussion, consideration, or interviews, prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees or employees of any public body, and evaluation of performance of departments or schools and public institutions of higher education where such evaluation will necessarily involve discussions of the performance of specific individuals pursuant to section 2.2-3711A1, namely to discuss investigations at an elementary school and investigation at a high school. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. By unanimous vote, we are now in closed session. Committee has convened a closed session on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires certification by this committee that such closed session was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the School Board Audit Committee hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed session to which the certification applies, and two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
3 ayes, ayes have it. We are in open session. And we are, if there's any other business? Going once, going twice? Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's one more thing. May 27th, 2026 at 1:15 PM is the current schedule for the next meeting. As always, I'll let you guys know a couple weeks in advance, as early as I can, if I need to move that date. And anybody else, please provide that information as we close on that date if you have any conflicts. For now, that's it. Any other items? Okay, thank you so much. We're adjourned.